Chapter 2. The Heavy Toll. The rain lashed down outside as Celine guided a grieving Iris towards the hospital. Each step was laden with the weight of loss. Every raindrop that hit them seemed to echo the tears that streamed down Iris's face, blending with the rain, streaking her face with sorrow. Inside the hospital, the antiseptic smell of the corridors was a stark contrast to the earthy, mystical sense of the occult from the house they had left behind. Celine could feel the weight of the loss, not just of Dorian, but of the life that Iris had been carrying. The wails from the room next door were a piercing reminder of the reality of their situation. Iris lay in the bed, her face pallid, her body shaking in pain. Celine held onto her hand, trying to offer a sliver of comfort. Between gasps of pain, Iris whispered, "I miss him so much, Celine. Dorian, my husband. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Our child, our family, it's all gone." Celine's own heart wrenched, and she had to fight back her tears. She remembered the chilling moment of Iris lunging at her with the dagger, fueled by envy and passion. But now, seeing Iris so shattered and vulnerable, Celine's heart was filled with nothing but empathy. "You loved him," Celine whispered, caressing Iris's hair. "You both deserve so much more." Iris's face twisted with pain, and the medical machines around her began to beep urgently. Nurses rushed in, forcing Celine outside. From beyond the glass, she watched, helpless, as they tried to save what was left of the life Iris had been bearing. Time stretched, every second feeling like hours, before a nurse finally emerged, her expression grave. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "She lost the baby." Celine's knees buckled, and she slumped to the floor, devastated. The world seemed to close in. Not only had they lost Dorian, but now the symbol of Iris and Dorian's love had been cruelly snatched away. When she was eventually allowed to see Iris, Celine found her friend staring blankly at the ceiling, the spark in her eyes extinguished. "Every part of him is gone," Iris murmured hoarsely. "We'll find a way," Celine whispered determinedly, even though she had no clue where to start. "We'll bring him back, both of them." The gravity of everything seemed overwhelming. It felt as though they were being pulled into a black chasm, with the glow of hope dimming with each passing moment. Celine, seeing the rising anger and despair in Iris's eyes, took a deep breath, trying to remain calm amidst the emotional turmoil. "Iris," she began, her voice shaky, "you have to remember that every child is innocent. They shouldn't be dragged into our mess." Iris turned her eyes to Celine, red and swollen from crying. "It's not fair," she choked out. "Why does your daughter remain untouched? Why does she get to live while mine is gone?" Celine's heart ached, her own guilt mingling with Iris's pain. "I don't know," she admitted softly, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "But she's just a child. She didn't ask for any of this." Suddenly, the realization that she hadn't checked on Valeria all day struck Celine. "Excuse me, Iris," she murmured, stepping out of the room. She dialed her mother Isla's number, waiting anxiously for her to pick up. The sound of her mother's familiar voice on the other end was a relief. "Hello, dear," Ayla greeted. "You called at a good time. Mr. and Mrs. Priest are here, visiting Valeria." Celine's blood ran cold. Memories of the priest's true forms as Lilith and Samuel rushed back. "What are they doing there?" She hissed into the phone, her voice urgent. "They said they came to see their granddaughter," Ayla replied, sounding perplexed by Celine's reaction. "Listen to me carefully, Mom. Do not under any circumstances let them take Valeria. Keep her close. I'll be there soon," Celine instructed, her voice tight with panic. She rushed back into the room, grabbing Iris's arm. "We need to go." "Now," she insisted. Iris looked up, confusion evident in her eyes. "What's happening?" "The priests, Lilith and Samuel, they're at my parents' house. They're with Valeria," Celine explained hurriedly. Iris's face paled even more. "We need to protect her. She's the last piece of Dorian we have left." With a shared look of determination, the two women rushed out of the hospital, praying they'd reach Valeria in time. The drive to Celine's parents' house felt agonizingly long. Every traffic light, every slow driver seemed like a deliberate attempt by the universe to hinder them. Iris, despite her earlier state in the hospital, was now gripped with a sense of urgency. She kept glancing out of the window, her eyes darting around as if expecting to see a sign of the priests, or worse, their true forms. "I shouldn't have left her," Celine muttered, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. "I shouldn't have." "It's not your fault," Iris said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We couldn't have known they would go after her." As they turned onto the street where Celine's parents lived, they both caught sight of an unfamiliar black car parked out of the house. Its windows were tinted and an eerie silence seemed to emanate from it. The front door of the house was ajar. Celine parked haphazardly on the driveway, not caring about the way the car was positioned. She and Iris both rushed to the door, dread filling them as they entered. The living room was in chaos. Furniture was overturned, vases shattered. Celine's heart raced as she called out, "Mom! Dad! Valeria!" There was no response. The house felt empty, devoid of the warmth and comfort it had always held for Celine. As they moved further in, they reached the kitchen and found a note on the table. Celine picked it up, her hands trembling. The note read, "You have something we desire. We have something you cherish. The scales must balance. Meet us at the old chapel in Blackhaven at midnight. Come alone." Iris peered over Celine's shoulder, reading the note, her face contorted in anger. "They took her," she whispered, her voice filled with rage. "They took Valeria." Celine felt a cold numbness spreading through her. "We have to get her back," she murmured. "We have to." Iris nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll save her, together." The two women, bound by shared grief, pain, and now a shared mission, prepared to face the very entities they feared the most. The dimly lit living room, painted in deep blue shadows from the moonlight filtering in through the draped windows, was a silent witness to the mounting tension. Every piece of furniture seemed to emanate the memories they held, laughter, love, and family gatherings. Yet tonight the air was thick with a chilling foreboding. Iris's pacing seemed rhythmic, almost hypnotic, as she moved back and forth. Her mind was a whirlwind. Once Dorian returns, she thought, what will I do? Can we ever go back to what we were? And if not, what then? The palpable void left by her miscarried child mingled with the terror of the ongoing ordeal, making her thoughts heavy with sorrow. Stopping momentarily, she looked at Celine with eyes that held pools of unsaid emotions. "Celine," she whispered, the weight of her voice holding back tears, "Do you think there's a way out of this? A way to have Dorian back and move on?" Celine, lost in her thoughts, was momentarily startled. Images of dark alleyways, shadowy figures, and whispered conversations from her days in New Orleans PD flashed before her eyes. "There might be a way," she began, her tone thoughtful. "When I was with the New Orleans PD, I met a few FBI agents who specialized in, well, cases that couldn't be explained. Unusual cases, supernatural even. They might help." Iris, her despair briefly replaced with surprise, replied, "Supernatural FBI agents? Are you serious?" Celine smirked, her usual fiery spirit breaking through for a moment. "Oh, very. One doesn't work in New Orleans without seeing a thing or two that defies explanation. But reaching out to them, would it put Valeria at more risk?" Iris asked, her maternal instincts kicking in. Celine sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "I don't know, Iris, but doing nothing surely will. We need allies, especially now." Iris looked down, her inner turmoil evident. "Can I really go through with this? What if Dorian isn't the man I knew? What if—" Interrupting her reverie, Celine softly said, "We'll get through this, Iris, together." Their moment was broken by the shrill ring of Celine's phone. As Celine answered, a cold wave of dread washed over her. It was clear that the game had only just begun. And immediately the chilling voice of Lilith echoed through the speaker. "Listen closely, Celine." Lilith's voice was eerily calm but dripping with malevolence. "Your dear parents have been such gracious hosts. Pity they won't be around for much longer." Celine's heart thudded loudly in her chest, her face draining of color. Through the phone, Isla's voice trembled. "Celine, I love you. Remember that. Protect Valeria." A heart-wrenching scream followed, chilling the two women to their bones. There was a cruel laughter and then silence. The call had ended. Iris immediately rushed to Celine. "Let's go now." The two fled the scene and rushed to the airport to board a flight to Blackhaven. The once serene chapel at Blackhaven was now the stage for an unfolding horror. As Celine and Iris approached, they noticed the large double doors of the chapel were slightly ajar. Eerie red light streamed from within, the very air thick with the smell of sulfur. Upon entering, the two women were met with a sight that would haunt them forever. In the center of the chapel, an elaborate ritual circle glowed in a pulsating, hellish light. Around the circle stood Oscar and Ayla, hands tied, terror evident in their eyes. Valeria was in the center, her small form surrounded by swirling dark shadows. And towering above them all was Lilith, her eyes burning with a demonic intensity. Celine stepped forward, her voice trembling with rage. "Release them, Lilith. This isn't their fight." Lilith chuckled darkly. "Every soul has its price, dear Celine. They are the price for your interference." Without warning, Lilith extended her hand and a torrent of dark energy shot out, consuming Oscar and Ayla. Their screams of agony pierced the silence before being abruptly silenced. Their lifeless bodies crumbled to ash, leaving Valeria standing alone, tears streaming down her face. "No," Celine screamed, her voice echoing throughout the chapel. She lunged at Lilith, but the demoness merely waved her hand, sending Celine crashing into the pews. Iris tried to approach, but invisible chains bound her in place, rendering her helpless. Lilith turned to Valeria, her fingers caressing the child's tear-streaked face. "Now, my dear, you'll come with me." And with a swift motion, the floor beneath Valeria opened up, revealing a vortex of flames and darkness. Before Celine or Iris could react, Lilith and Valeria were sucked into the vortex, which then sealed shut, leaving the chapel in sudden, deafening silence. Celine, picking herself up from the floor, tears staining her cheeks, turned to Iris. "We have to get her back, no matter the cost." Her voice was resolute, the weight of loss and determination evident in her eyes. Iris nodded, her own eyes filled with a fiery resolve. "We will bring her home, Celine, and Lilith will pay for what she's done." The once serene chapel at Blackhaven was now the stage for an unfolding horror. As Celine and Iris approached, they noticed the large double doors of the chapel were slightly ajar. Eerie red light streamed from within, the very air thick with the smell of sulfur. Upon entering, the two women were met with a sight that would haunt them forever. In the center of the chapel, an elaborate ritual circle glowed in a pulsating, hellish light. Around the circle stood Oscar and Ayla, hands tied, terror evident in their eyes. Valeria was in the center, her small form surrounded by swirling dark shadows, and towering above them all was Lilith, her eyes burning with a demonic intensity. Celine stepped forward, her voice trembling with rage. "Release them. Lilith, this isn't their fight." Lilith chuckled darkly. "Every soul has its price, dear Celine. They are the price for your interference." Without warning, Lilith extended her hand and a torrent of dark energy shot out, consuming Oscar and Ayla. Their screams of agony pierced the silence before being abruptly silenced. Their lifeless bodies crumbled to ash, leaving Valeria standing alone, tears streaming down her face. "No," Celine screamed, her voice echoing throughout the chapel. She lunged at Lilith, but the demoness merely waved her hand, sending Celine crashing into the pews. Iris tried to approach, but invisible chains bound her in place, rendering her helpless. Lilith turned to Valeria, her fingers caressing the child's tear-streaked face. "Now, my dear, you'll come with me." And with a swift motion, the floor beneath Valeria opened up, revealing a vortex of flames and darkness. Before Celine or Iris could react, Lilith and Valeria were sucked into the vortex, which then sealed shut, leaving the chapel in sudden, deafening silence. Celine, picking herself up from the floor, tears staining her cheeks, turned to Iris. "We have to get her back, no matter the cost." Her voice was resolute, the weight of loss and determination evident in her eyes. Iris nodded, her own eyes filled with a fiery resolve. "We will bring her home, Celine, and Lilith will pay for what she's done." Celine, though grief-stricken, tried to stay grounded, feeling the weight of the need to save her daughter. As she wiped away her tears, Iris approached her, her demeanor both comforting and insistent. "We need Dorian," Iris stated, her voice unwavering. "If we're going to go up against Lilith and save Valeria, he's the key." Celine, while suspicious of Iris, knew she was right. Dorian's powers and knowledge of the occult were unmatched. "But how? Iris interrupted her, her eyes shifting for a moment. "There might be a way. I've come across a ritual in the past, one that can summon a lost soul." Celine stared at her, hope igniting in her eyes. "If there's even a slight chance, we have to take it." As they began discussing the intricacies of the ritual, Celine couldn't help but notice a glint in Iris's eyes, a glint that made her uncomfortable. The same glint she'd seen when Iris had looked at Dorian, full of obsession and possession. While Celine was desperate to save Valeria, she knew she had to tread carefully with Iris. With each step forward, the web of deceit, power, and obsession would only grow more complex. She had to remain vigilant for Valeria's sake, and for her own place, rendering her helpless. Lilith turned to Valeria, her fingers caressing the child's tear-streaked face. "Now, my dear, you'll come with me." And with a swift motion, the floor beneath Valeria opened up, revealing a vortex of flames and darkness. Before Celine or Iris could react, Lilith and Valeria were sucked into the vortex, which then sealed shut, leaving the chapel in sudden, deafening silence. Celine, picking herself up from the floor, tears staining her cheeks, turned to Iris. "We have to get her back, no matter the cost." Her voice was resolute, the weight of loss and determination evident in her eyes. Iris nodded, her own eyes filled with a fiery resolve. "We will bring her home, Celine, and Lilith will pay for what she's done." In that moment, Celine felt tiniest flicker of hope, though it barely managed to shine through the overwhelming darkness of their situation. Her memories of New Orleans and the specialized FBI agents came to her again. They needed all the help they could get to fight entities as powerful as Lilith and Samael. Then it settled, Celine spoke, breaking the silence that had enveloped the ruined chapel. We'll need allies, weapons, and knowledge. If the FBI can't help us, perhaps there are others who can. Other beings who are enemies of Lilith and Samael. We'll leave no stone unturned. As they left the chapel, the dawn was just beginning to break. In the pale light, the two women appeared like war-torn soldiers coming back from a brutal battle, which in a way, they were. Back at Celine's wrecked home, they began their research. Iris delved into the arcane texts and spells that might offer them a window into Lilith's domain, while Celine reached out to her old contacts, trying to find any thread that could lead them to help. Hours passed in frantic, focused activity. Eventually, Celine's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number appeared on her screen. I hear you're looking for help in matters not of this world. Meet me at Café Rousseau tomorrow at noon. Celine showed the message to Iris. What do you think? A trap? Could be, Iris agreed. But at this point, can we afford not to take the risk? Celine thought for a moment and then nodded. We'll go, but we'll be prepared for anything. Café Rousseau was bustling with people when they arrived the next day, the smell of coffee and freshly baked pastries filling the air. They found a table near the window and waited. A woman looking no older than her early 30s, with piercing green eyes and a streak of silver in her otherwise jet black hair, approached them. I'm Alexandra, she introduced herself as she took a seat. You must be Celine and Iris. I've heard you're in quite the predicament. Against Lilith, no less. Celine leaned forward. Who are you? How can you help? Alexandra smirked. I'm someone who has a score to settle with Lilith. As for how I can help you, well, let's just say I can offer you something that not even the FBI can. I have access to relics that can ward off dark entities and open doors to realms you wouldn't believe exist. Celine and Iris exchanged glances. All right, Alexandra, you have our attention. Alexandra smiled. Excellent. Prepare yourselves, ladies. You're about to dive into a world darker and more dangerous than you've ever known. But don't worry, the light at the end is worth it. After all, we're not just fighting to save a child. We're fighting to restore balance. Are you ready? Determined, Celine and Iris both nodded. The path ahead was treacherous and fraught with peril, but the promise of a flicker of light in the encroaching darkness gave them hope. Together they would face whatever came their way, and Lilith would rue the day she decided to take from them what they held most dear. It was as if the universe itself felt the gravity of their resolve. The cafe's ambience seemed to dim for a moment, as if acknowledging the seriousness of their mission. As they left Café Rousseau, Celine felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their fight was far from over, but at least now, they weren't fighting it alone.